The Group on Earth Observations was actually created in 2005 as an outgrowth of the first World Summit on Sustainable Development. Now, that was held in 2002 down in Johannesburg, South Africa, so it took a couple years to stand up the organization. But the genesis was, we've got tremendous capability. Countries around the world are launching satellites, have got ground-based systems and sensors that are collecting Earth observation data. If we look at maybe accomplishments over the last 100 years, we've had many accomplishments in the weather domain. Why aren't we bringing that same level of commitment, that same integration of global resources to each of these other, we happen to call them societal benefit areas, but it's thematic areas: agriculture, biodiversity, climate, disasters, ecosystems, energy, health, water, and weather. So the intent here is to deliver Earth observations not only to each one of these individual domains, but across those domains, because even within each one of these domains, things are quite siloed. And so how can we integrate space-based observations, ground-based observations to deliver results to each of these areas and the connections, the interstices between and among those areas? So here's what we look like today. 90-member countries, still only half of the United Nations members, and we are not a United Nations organization. Pretty good coverage in the Northern Hemisphere, substantial holes in the Southern Hemisphere, whether it's South America, Africa, the Middle East, or the Pacific Island states. I think the other thing I would like to mention here is that USAID has come in and said they would really like at least one of these prizes to be targeted to either a developer from the developing world or applications that will particularly pertain to the developing world. And I think when you see a map like this, you can see that we as an organization still have some challenges. But what separates us from UN organizations, I told you, intergovernmental of those 90 member countries, but it's these 77 participating organizations. We had 67 up until January, 10 more joined in January. What you will see are UN organizations here, scientific international associations. I've circled OGC, the Open Geospatial Consortium. You'll hear from them later because much of the private sector largely comes in and contributes now to GEO through OGC. But again, if you've been attending the conference this week and heard our remarks earlier in the week, the reason we are targeting this Geospatial World Forum and last year's in Rotterdam is that it brings the private sector to the table. And so not only are we intending to coordinate governments, our participating organizations, but if you really want to ensure the uptake of Earth observations, then we want to unleash the power of the private sector and the creativity and innovation that exists there. So just real quickly, and you'll hear more about this a little bit later on, but we have a homepage. It's going through some redesign right now, and it'll be launched in a couple months. We've got a portal. You'll hear about that. We've got some interoperability agreements that take place between and among organizations. The information that exists in many clouds are shown on the left-hand side of this graph, largely government data. We are advocating broad open data policies so that no matter what organization you see on the left-hand side of this graph delivers its information to the world. You will see some emerging partnerships with the private sector, whether it's on interoperability agreements or building tools and products that, again, can enhance and reinforce this information. I want to set that context because largely through this interoperability agreement, what you have seen is a tremendous uptake or growth in information for which exists in those clouds and for what we have access to. 20 brokered systems, about 7 million resources. These can be complete data sets. They can be individual images. Those 7 million resources are comprised of more than 65 million granules, the smallest element for which we manage. It could be, for which we measure. It could be a stream gauge record. But the point is, these are largely still siloed, discipline by discipline, and we're hoping hoping that an Appathon like is being launched today will start unleashing some of this information. Let's look real quickly at a construct that I think just shows where we're going and also the limitations. Imagine you've got a hypercube. We happen to call this our GEOS hypercube because we're talking about building a global Earth observation system of systems. And there are a couple different dimensions or domains. We can look at things thematically, like our societal benefit areas, agriculture, biodiversity, disasters. We can look at things along a space continuum from just this building to this country, to this region, to the continent, to the globe. We can also look at things along a temporal spectrum. So in our infrastructure, we have precipitation data in France that was collected from 1946 to 2013. We have global precipitation data that's collected over a selected time frame. We have some related data like land use data in Europe, 1984 to 2010. You could start pulling in demographic data. We could look at East Africa and look at drought observations for a selected period of time, or West Africa for observations over a different period of time. As this cube starts to get built out, what you will actually see is that you can come into the infrastructure and search thematically, and search geographically, or search temporally. So while our job is largely to build out this cube and make sure that we have all the domains covered, all the time spans covered, all the spatial scales covered, the data and the users still only know little pieces of this story. They don't know the whole story. And so we're really hoping that with the development that happens with young people, old people around the world, we'll start bridging some of this information so that we can start connecting with people that need applications and more access to this Earth observation data. So again, if we look at some of our accomplishments over the last 5 or so years, you'll see I'm going to go real quickly through this next series of slides because you will see we are still delivering data domain by domain. Okay, so in agriculture, a couple countries come together, a couple participating organizations come together, deliver some particular results. We can look at cold regions, different set of countries, different set of participating organizations, different set of domains or delivery of products. We can look at the real-time delivery of disaster information in this particular slide, and the partners that participate in that. We can look at ecosystem classification. We can look at energy tools that are being developed by these partners around the world. We can look at advanced land cover products and the role that this information plays, and we can look at global urban footprints. A lot of the discussions already at this week have told you that by 2050, 75% of the world's population is going to live in urban areas. We can look at health data. We've heard a lot about that this week. Happens to be dust off the Saharan desert and the impacts that may have. And we're looking at more actionable water information. So these are great accomplishments that have been made by countries, that have been made by participating organizations. It is still largely scientists talking to scientists. And so what we are hoping that this Appathon does is start creating applications that can reach citizens, that can reach governments who hear from their citizens, and can start breaking down some of the barriers that we are still faced with.